Hello, and welcome to another episode of Ask Adam Live. ASK is the acronym for Always Seek Knowledge. This is one thing I've found just a huge benefit is always asking, always wondering, always being inquisitive, understanding more about life and kind of why people do things, why things get done, why certain actions are more important than others. This has ultimately been life-changing. And that's really the foundation of why I started all this was ask. Always seek knowledge. It's the acronym I've found to be most beneficial. In today's episode, standing out in a crowded market. I will share with you some of the experiences that I've had, as well as some helpful tools I think, will be something you can remember and something you can certainly benefit from. Now let's get on with the show. Standing out in a crowded market. Welcome to the Ask Adam Live podcast. You know, a little bit about me is, I've had some experience in sales, both looking for clients, both fighting off clients, negotiating and understanding clients, and in the certain industries that I've been in. And so standing out in a crowded market, well, that was certainly something I've practiced. And I guess I've got a little something to say about it. So today we're tackling one of the biggest challenges for entrepreneurs and professionals. How to truly stand out when everyone seems to be offering similar services or products. You know, with my experience in real estate, insurance sales, and just general networking, both with gig work and in my professional career, standing out has been, it's ironically a unique thing that, you need to consider. By the end of this episode, I hope that you will have some actionable strategies, discover some breakthroughs that you can utilize, and maybe declutter the noise that you're probably experiencing to be able to connect with your ideal clients. And I mean authentically. One of the things I like to use is the impact framework that we will cover in today's episode. Let me ask you, how many of you out there are struggling to find that ideal client? How many times have you just really struggled with an interview, if you will, of that potential client and then walked away wondering, did I get it? Or did you nail it thinking you had it only to find out you didn't? How can we stand out in today's market? You know, one of the things that I've found most beneficial, if I can share with you for a moment before we get into that framework, is again to ask, seeking knowledge. Let me share with you a brief experience. In my real estate career, I found many times that when dealing with a client, having a conversation with them, understanding what it was that they needed, meaning to, let's say, example, sell a home. Here was Charles and his wife, and they were looking to sell their home. Ironically, this was a second home for them, so a little bit of the urgency to sell and move to maybe get into the new school district or to adjust for family purposes, whatever it was, second homes just didn't have that urgency. So I really had to learn how to be patient when working with those clients. One of the things I discovered was, when do they need to sell? Because if there isn't that level of urgency, then there certainly isn't that push to, get things done. So understanding truly what their goals were made it most beneficial for me to understand how I could best help them. And not every situation was the same. So I found myself asking multiple times in different ways, quite frankly, with different customers. And so first of all, it was kind of understanding their needs. For instance, Charles and his wife, they were looking to sell their second home. And they were kind of up on the price as far as market value, in my opinion. They had some unique features to the home, but still didn't stand out in the market. Some of that was, well, let's just say part of the neighborhood. So a lot of different unique features that really made this kind of complicated. And when I asked, well, what's your main objective? Like to sell the home, like to get it liquidated, change the investment to something else. Perfectly understood. When I shared with them my marketing plan and everything that I could provide that was catered to basically what they were asking for my previous 12 questions that I always asked, then there was the statement, well, thanks for your time. Okay, now what? We're moving into the contract. This is the process that I had put in place. Well, that's not the way they had it planned, and basically kind of sent me on my way. Now, this was in a point in my career where, man, I had it nailed. I knew what it was. But here's the value I want to share with you today. Here is the impact that I believe is most important is before I left, I asked Charles, I said, Charles, I'm kind of getting the sense that we're not going to come to an agreement today, but let me ask you this. What would be the one feature or benefit that I could have offered up front that would have already convinced you that we could have a relationship? And he thought for a minute and basically was that I wasn't very excited about his property. I didn't have this enthusiasm that this was the greatest property on the planet. And so I learned something from that experience. I can share with you at the end of the day that I really didn't get too excited about properties because, quite frankly, they were all the same. And sometimes that emotion is what gets clouded. That emotion is what disrupts the impact that you could have made, is because you feel the property is as important as the client thinks it is, and the market just doesn't see it that way. The market sees it as property. That being said, short story long, as I did catch up with Charles and his wife much later, although I didn't get the listing, I did facilitate in showing the home several times and basically going above and beyond where I didn't overstep. In fact, I believe I copied the agent. And each time I showed the property, I sent feedback to the agent and to Charles and his wife. I did have their personal information and we did kind of have a relationship. Now, I don't feel that this was crossing the client agent agreement with the other agent because I shared it with them as well in kind of a joint email to say, hey, Charles, just wanted to let you know, showed your property again to some clients, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and they very much appreciated the property. I wanted to give you some of their personal feedback that they left with me. I want to share with you the gem of this is not only did it allow me to connect with Charles and his agent to share with him that not only was I showing the mess out of his home, meaning I had a roster of clients just falling out of the file drawer looking at properties. So I kind of demonstrated that what I told them earlier was the truth and that I was not being dishonest, but also that I was providing genuine feedback. And that was a little bit of maybe some undercover competition with their own agent, because I'm not sure if their agent was doing this. Again, don't think I was crossing any lines. I was providing to Charles the service that I think he kind of needed to understand was how his property stood in today's market. Interestingly enough, with all the times that I showed the property, I did manage to produce a purchaser for Charles and his wife's property. And it was interesting that we sat at the closing table and he basically kind of gave me an attaboy where everything that I told him I would promise, I did deliver, even though I wasn't his agent. And he did thank me very much that at least I was able to participate at some degree, even though we weren't able to come to that original agreement. I hope this example shares a little bit with you how to kind of step up and above and beyond and to be impactful in kind of what your original business plan is. So when you do present a client or customer with something, that your presenting it in that impactful, unique position, and stand by that. Because if you don't win everyone, it's okay. It's going to come around, and they're going to see that you provided exactly what you said you would, just in an indirect manner. So first of all, let's identify your unique gifts, right? In impact. As I've always said, we all have sort of this soul's purpose, our innate value, and you can apply this in any industry, in any business that you're in. So whether it's a startup, whether you're working on business, whether you're looking to reinvent your business, this impact framework, I think, is huge and quite valuable. You might even find through going through this practice, or a little bit of this self-workshop, if you will, you might discover a few things about yourself. You might find, oh my gosh, my soul's purpose has been unidentified. And again, that's what we do here at the A.S. Johnson Agency, is help people find their soul's purpose. Ask yourself 3 questions to uncover your true differentiators. What makes you unique? What makes you different? Do you have a particular niche, if you will, in the neighborhood? Do you participate in certain events? Are you active in the school district with your children so that you know a lot more than, say, the average person about schools and the process of going through schools? Utilize some of the things that you're already practicing. You know, the things that you think, hey, are really maybe not something. You'd be surprised that they're actually pretty important, that you know about them and how you can stand out in your particular market. Again, this is speaking of real estate, but say you're a great blog poster or a social media guru, or you just have this knack for putting things together in a digital or physical form. If that's your niche, utilize it and put it to some amazing use. I think you'll be surprised once you start asking yourself a few of these questions. You will most undoubtedly find that you do have some talents you probably weren't even aware of. As I shared with you, that was a little bit of how I leveraged utilizing my talent, is that I just was unwavering. I wasn't going to give anything up. You know, commission was one of the others. When it was a certain percentage of bananas, I stood firm. I said, I can't give anything up. And maybe that's a little bit of my bias towards that particular market. But even with, you know, say your cost of service, what you offer in your company, there's always room to negotiate, but certainly stand firm that what you're offering does have its value and is worth something. You can always adjust the time and bananas sort of fraction, and that's based on your own business. But at the end of the day, we're still after a certain amount of bananas, and we all have a certain amount of time. So let's be clear when we understand that, is that you can always negotiate within that, but don't ever waver from that. Because again, this is your unique position. So stick with it. In our impact framework, M is for mindset mastery. You know, one of the things I've found, and this is dealing with current clients, is addressing the toxic 10. And you've probably seen this in the other podcast as well as some other publications. But some of this can be the fear of maybe failure, self-doubt, imposter syndrome. And this can prevent your authentic differentiation. You know, there are some techniques for overcoming these limited beliefs, specifically related to competition. Again, what is your unique value? What is it that you bring to the table that you can provide to your clients that is unique and different from anyone else? Also, I think some of this has to do with mindset, so we cannot let that go by the wayside, is you have to have a positive mindset, and you have to really, first of all, You got to believe in what it is you're doing. And if you really have trouble believing in what it is that you're practicing and performing and providing, well, that's the root cause right there. Go back to step one, ask yourself what your unique gifts are, and wipe the slate clean and start over with something else. I've also been there and I've done that. I've changed careers several times, so it's not a strange thing for me. Certainly not an easy task, but it's certainly something that, well, kind of, yeah, sooner than later, you want to address that and find out what it is that you're uniquely engaged in, something that you're passionate about, and something that you can move forward with without any wavering, that you can be your complete, true, authentic self. So the connection between the mindset and, of course, your market positioning. When you have a positive mindset and you see everything not through rose-colored glasses, but certainly in that positive realm, I think this also creates that position of unwavering, where you have that strong sense of purpose. You have those innate values. You bring something to the table and you're not willing to give it up. So understanding your mindset and your market position is certainly very important. And that's the M in the mindset mastery. P is purpose-driven positioning. Align your offerings with your soul's purpose. Again, you're really passionate about what it is you're doing, and then it's, has everything in place and everything is just naturally coming together. Well, this is your purpose-driven position. Also, this aligns with how you articulate your why. Remember, Simon Sinek, quite popular author and public speaker as well, he discussed many times the why. Make sure that it's resonating with your ideal audience. And if it's not resonating, you're probably not working with your ideal audience. And so be specific. Again, don't find yourself in the situation with your business where you're working and negotiating and strategizing with maybe someone who just doesn't align with you. And that's okay. Not every client is going to align with you. And you also don't need to feel obligated to, turn sideways, bend over backwards, whatever the position is that just is uncomfortable for you and your business to accommodate. Because I can tell you from my experience, is anytime I stepped away from my core values, anytime I adjusted my unique self, anytime it was just the statement or question of, hey, I want to help this client out and I'm not real comfortable with it, but it is, dare I say, quote unquote, a transaction. Now you've just crossed the barrier and you basically have dishonored yourself. So don't get into that mindset. Remember, purpose-driven positioning. Know your why and understand what it is you're doing. And this will naturally attract the dedicated followers, which are going to align with you. It's really not that hard when you start to position yourself in that direction. But the moment you start wavering, I can almost guarantee is the moment it's going to get difficult, it's going to get frustrating, may even get overwhelming. And now you're starting to let that toxic 10 seep in. And that's no place to be in business. So remember, know your why, be your authentic self. This is part of what's sort of encapsulating your purpose-driven position. Let's move on to A, your authentic communication. Now, let's be frank. Developing a voice that reflects your true self and values, this is hugely important. It's kind of interesting. I found many times that I wanted to speak professionally, that I wanted to have this resonation. I wanted to resonate with my clients, this just being a professional. And I found, well, it didn't work. It was kind of frustrating in the beginning. And that I found being my unique self was how I dressed. And I dressed sharp. Suits, ties, briefcase, I showed up the works in a professional manner. But I was also the first one to sit down. Maybe it was slightly confusing, but I would sit down and then have that casual conversation with them and speak in layman's terms, meaning true English, meaning not the technical speak of the business I was in, but just in general, having that conversation. Quite frankly, that gave the disposition to my clients, or the observation that, first of all, I was a professional and that I wasn't treating my business casually. Although I was treating the conversation casually, because most people aren't really going to share a lot with you unless they're comfortable. And I found a lot of that to be true in the insurance industry. And although I really wasn't selling anything, I wasn't convincing anyone to purchase something. It was kind of a unique and different way of sales. Is I was more interviewing them to qualify and quantify whether or not certain products or services they could even apply for. It was a very unique like position, because you weren't really selling, you were more of identifying. That being said, that authentic communication, it helped build trust and credibility with my clients. And the same thing with real estate. I could talk about the different vocabulary words of the quote unquote real estate English dictionary, but that got confusing for certain clients because they really, they, let's just say they didn't go to customer school. So they didn't quite know what all of the real estate jargon was. And when I would sit down and have that conversation, that was great. We have a tool for that. And I would convert that and say, here's what we can offer. Here's what I provide. And not just spilling out real estate jargon. And they found that quite refreshing. So you want to kind of maintain this across all of your platforms. That's why I say I found this to also be successful in my stint in the insurance business, is that I did have those general conversations with someone and I allowed them to feel comfortable. And I also kind of maintained that authenticity to share with them. And that was probably an emotional position to be in, was in the insurance industry, is just to give the heartbreaking news that something that they really wanted, something they thought was going to change and protect their life, they didn't qualify for it. I mean, that was just daunting. And to realize, once we went through the communication and education process, that my clients understood, yes, this is a great tool. Yes, this is going to benefit my life. Yes, I want to move forward with this option. And then sometimes 2 to 3 weeks later, after several inquiries from things that were quite frankly out of my hands as the agent, all of a sudden came the devastating no, you didn't qualify and we can't give you that option. And now I was in the position of kind of having to maybe give them something they would have to just settle for, not something that they wanted. And so many times it was, gosh, I wish we had this conversation 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, where A, it was more affordable, B, it was more obtainable, and C, you would have already had the rest of the assurance of what you needed. So although we had great conversations and I kept the same consistency across the platforms of speaking with clients and maintaining the authenticity. So authentic communication is key. Consistent value creation. That is C. The power of showing up regularly for your audience or for your client. When you have a repetitive meeting, when you need to show up for something, I've always found that it's always better to be early than to even show up 1 minute late. Be there for them. Maybe let them know that, kind of give them the feeling that they're number one, that your day is literally pivoted around them. Now, I'm not saying that you need to spend the whole day prepping for that meeting. I'm just saying you're creating that value. You're letting them know that, you know what, that extra 5 or 10 minutes of you already being there is showing to your client that you're prepared for them. Now, you could be doing some other things, so let's remember to always be active and always, whether it's studying some information and understanding your client a little bit more prior to the meeting, whether it's preparing for your next client, whatever works for you. Certainly don't waste any time in your day, but certainly to show up and be ready at the table of discussion and conversation and wherever that meeting is taking place, that you're already there and that you're ready to perform. Again, you're creating consistent value, something they know they can count on. Maybe they're running early in their schedule and they show up 10 minutes early. You never know. And I speak from experience that that extra 10 minutes that you added to the day, to your calendar by being there, and they happen to show up early and you got to maybe engage in a personal conversation prior to conducting business, that could be the pivotal point that you then created a new client or customer in their eyes because you were there maybe having that personal discussion before getting into business. So never consider that you're wasting time by showing up early. You're actually creating value. And quality versus quantity. When you're providing something, I think it's better to just have, like I said, I had 12 questions. Although I performed about 186 different actions in my real estate career, I had 12 core questions that I would ask a client and understand where they're at. With insurance, it was about 6, just to understand where their position was. But those were quality questions. And it wasn't about quantity with regards to sale either. I spent the same amount of time, whether it was a average home price or whether it was an extreme market price, exotic property with attributes and a high sales price. They all got my same service because I delivered consistent value. Planning process and practice approach, which basically sustained value in each of my deliveries, quite frankly, and no matter what my business was. Even when I did gig work, I had about 3 questions that I would ask somebody, no matter who was in the car. It usually sparked a conversation. It usually demonstrated interest. And quite frankly, I'm not sure if anybody else was doing that. It certainly wasn't the typical, hey, how's your day? No, there were 3 unique questions that I would ask each individual rider. If they didn't answer the first one, I knew it was a time to be quiet and they were just enjoying the ride or they were busy. Many times they were already on the phone. But if conversation did engage, I always had my go-to 3 questions. I also found that this not only created value and feedback from those individuals to say, hey, this was a unique experience. Or, hey, you gave me an idea and now I need to go write it down. Yeah, now I need to go brainstorm. I didn't expect this. I just needed a ride from point A to point B, and you created an impact. So consistent value creation. T is targeted relationship building. Strategic networking versus mass marketing. I found that more with individuals than just the masses. We need to connect with individuals. They're going to sort of create that larger market, if you will, in a sense, but strategic networking is a far greater impact in your relationship building. Identify and connect with right partners and platforms that align with your business. Again, that goes back to don't just be in a relationship, a business relationship with someone just for the sake of being in a relationship. You're going to find that it's not authentic and it's going to become a struggle. And well, there's enough obstacles in business to some degree. We really don't need to make things more difficult. So connect with the right partners and be part of the right platform. Meaningful professional relationships that amplify your reach, that help enhance your brand and your business, that help promote your services and your products. You know, we've discussed several step-by-step ways of applying the impact framework. Also, some of the pitfalls to avoid when trying to sort of differentiate yourself. So I challenge you today, this week, I challenge you to take the impact assessment. It's on our website, and identify which of the 6 areas need your immediate attention. Based on your results, implement just one strategy we discussed today. Document the shifts you notice in the work page. Share your experience on social media with hashtag AskAdamImpact in the Facebook community. For those ready to dive deeper, I've created the Impact Mastery Workshop. Visit askadamlive.com, impact, and secure your spot. We'll work together to create your personalized market differentiation strategy. Remember, being different is not changing how you do it, it's just doing it better. Remember, life is happening for us, not to us. Standing out in your market is part of your journey to fulfill your soul's purpose. So once you've understood and created your own impact framework and implemented your steps, this is certainly going to make a change in your business. And like I said, if maybe it doesn't and it's not applicable to your current business and you realize maybe you're not fulfilling your soul's purpose, well, now's the time to make a change and to make an adjustment that's going to make a better you. Now you can apply the impact framework to the new business. I want to thank you for participating in today's episode. In our next episode, the influence advantage, building meaningful connections. I want to express my gratitude for you taking the time to tune in to our episode. Remember, that life is happening for us. Now let's go out and make it a great day.